Hello and welcome to In the Hyperloop. My name is Blake. It's the start of 2020 and we have a lot of Hyperloop news to kind of sort through. The first being not so much Hyperloop, but the Boring Company successfully halfway through their Las Vegas Convention Center project. As we read this Teslarati article, um, it was a project that was won for about $52 million on the Las Vegas Strip. And it's just one of 5 projects that the Boring Company has listed on the website. This has met with a lot of fanfare, but also some criticism by local government that thinks it's overboard. But we're just really happy that everything is going well and the Boring Company is over 50% the way through. And they did release some images. Nothing really out of the ordinary. This looks very similar to the images from Hawthorne, California, and the test track over there. And another image is kind of showing movement through the tunnel. Of course, we still haven't heard if Teslas will be inside this tunnel or the original people movers that we saw in the original renders from Tesla. So it's just really exciting that this test track is finally being completed, and it's nearly halfway done. So next off, the Hyperloop developers from northern Germany are breaking ground this year, and not in the US, but on their own doorstep. The Transrapid Test Facility in Leithen offers a unique testing conditions. So this is a really interesting article from Hyperloop Connected regarding the EU high-tech project from the HyperPod X group that has been a staple of past SpaceX Hyperloop pod competitions. And we're really excited to see that they have now gone on beyond the Hyperloop pod competition and have received an initial funding grant of 290,000 euros. This is to set up an office to establish a European research network and work with EU governments to build out the Hyperloop technology across Europe, and also build a test facility that might be around 500 meters long near the university. And it's the University of Oldenburg. They've have a lot of history with the Hyperloop pod competition, and we're really glad to see that this office can be established with the 2 employees, Lucas, the Master of Engineering of Physics and a longtime member of HyperPod X, dealing with the technical side, and Philip, who's working more on the economic and organizational aspect. So we're really excited to see HyperPod X branching out and getting this grant. We do know that VAR Hyperloop, which is from the TU München University, Technical University München, Munich, they are not wanting to go back to this Hyperloop pod competition after winning it all these years, and we haven't heard any updates from them. So both of these German Hyperloop pod competition teams are really branching out and working hard on their own to develop Hyperloop. Next, we're going to talk about Virgin Hyperloop 1. They submitted a competition of sorts, an RFP, that Delaware, Georgia, Missouri, New Mexico, North Carolina, North Dakota, Ohio, South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, Washington, and West Virginia all applied to for a certification center for the United States. And really interesting that not only are cities competing for test tracks, whether it's St. Louis to Kansas City, or Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania to Cleveland, Ohio, to Chicago. We've seen a lot of these types of routes, but this is actually just a certification track. And there was some news recently from India that Virgin Hyperloop 1 is having a little bit of difficulty getting their Pune to Mumbai certification track and potential Hyperloop track with the regional government. And so this is really fascinating that they're now focusing on the United States again in these different potential certification tracks. And we don't really know much of the details. We haven't seen any of the RFPs, and it's not been very public, but the certification track will probably be working very closely with the federal government in getting the criteria fulfilled of what Hyperloop would mean for the United States. So we're really excited. We're really glad that all of these different cities, a lot of them we haven't really heard about, like Delaware, never heard about it. Georgia, Missouri. Missouri did have that St. Louis, Missouri Hyperloop RFP. New Mexico is brand new. North Carolina does want to connect a couple cities with a smaller, shorter Hyperloop. North Dakota, we've never heard of. Ohio does want a Hyperloop. South Dakota, we've never heard of. Tennessee, we've never heard of. Texas, we have heard of wanting a Hyperloop. Washington, not really heard of it. And then West Virginia is actually a big supporter recently of Hyperloop, so that's to be expected. Some players, California is not there. Colorado's not there. And Massachusetts, etc. New England is really not there represented. So that's fascinating and really interesting update. Next, going back to SpaceX Hyperloop pod competition team, UC Berkeley Hyperloop is now focusing their team and effort to Formula Electric. So we want to wish them well on developing electric race cars, and UC Berkeley has always supported Hyperloop, and we wish them all the best. Next, going to the UK, the small diameter tube Magway has raised over £1 million through a whole bunch of investors. Their target was £750,000. This is a kind of a crowdfunding and investment pitch, but these small sized package delivery service using sort of Hyperloop technology of just linear induction motor. We think there's air in the tubes, but we're not sure. Really kicking off to a good start. Magway is doing very well, and we're really excited. They still have 13 days left in this crowdfunding, so there's a lot of pent-up demand for these very narrow diameter tubes that can be remotely drilled at low cost from one service center to another in another region. So that's really exciting, and they're focusing their market pitch really on how sustainable this will be in saving a lot of freight delivery, etc., from clogging up the roads. Changing subjects a little bit to Hyperloop TT. Bebop is still pitching Hyperloop Italia. We haven't heard about this yet, but this has been in the works for a long time, and we're looking forward to seeing this interview on Ray 1. So just kind of fun and interesting, and we're really curious of where the Hyperloop route would be in Italy. Of course, they're working really hard in Toulouse, France with their test track. Going back to Ohio and Hyperloop 1, the Ohio team made a stop at Hyperloop 1 to check out the test track out in Nevada, but they're also visiting CES, where the Virgin Hyperloop 1, I think, has a booth or one of their pods. And so it's just really interesting that Ohio is still working very diligently to get Hyperloop in Ohio and connecting it with Chicago and maybe Pittsburgh. So really interesting. Next, TU Delft, part of Delft Hyperloop, created this online course. It's free. Certainly take it, learn about it. This is the second offering of this course. It starts February 5th. I learned a lot. I've only gotten through the first week of lectures, but it's really good. Relevance and basic principles of Hyperloop, levitation, propulsion, and braking. That's really fascinating. It still seems like magic. Week 3 is passenger pod interior, communication and passenger experience, designing your own pod. Week 4 is Hyperloop infrastructure, safety, public acceptance, design your own safe haven. Week 5 is Networking, Politics, and Economic Potential. Week 6 is Crash Course, or course wrap-up and feedback. And this might be the second or third iteration of this course. I'd highly recommend you take it. Really a lot of dedication and time put in by Delft Hyperloop to develop this online course. So good job, Delft Hyperloop. Next, we're just going to look at brief Instagram posts, starting with SwissPod. They've been selected by a Green Tech Festival as one of the top 6 startups in Europe, and you can go vote for them at greentechfestival.com/awards. Go to the startup section, select SwissPod. They're still working really hard, and of course they're one of these companies that will sell the pod and the system to a regional transportation government. They don't really necessarily want to maintain it, but they always have had really great graphics, and so I'd highly recommend you check them out. HyperPoland, another SpaceX pod competition team offshoot, has a question for you. What connections do you want on your Magrail route? We're waiting for your ideas. So go write a comment on their Instagram page of where you would like to take their Magrail. And they demonstrated it last year, at the end of last year, and it was a success. And we're really looking forward to this kind of nuanced, phased approach of HyperPoland, and first, working with rail companies to upgrade existing lines to this Magrail thing, and then full phasing it into eventually enclosed tubes like a traditional Hyperloop. So good job, HyperPoland. And next, another SpaceX Hyperloop pod competition team is still going. They're opening for interviews February 1st, 2nd, and a workshop, levitation. So they're trying to get recruiting first years and second years. So check them out. And they're based in Manipal Institute of Technology. Next, Team Vegapod is working really hard testing the braking system. This is pretty loud, but really fascinating that they're working really hard on trying to. Nice. 0.141 seconds from 100 kilometers an hour. That's pretty amazing. So good job, Team Megapod, and thanks for sharing that. Gator Loop is pitching to the Chamber of Commerce in Gainesville, Florida, to bring Hyperloop to the forefront of intercity transportation discussions in Florida. Really fascinating. We haven't seen many other Hyperloop pod competition teams talk about this, but they've always worked with Chamber of Commerce's and other local governments to get perhaps feasibility studies for Hyperloop test facilities. So this is really interesting as we can read the agenda. They're on the agenda. So really fascinating. I hope Gatorloop can write a little blog about what's going on and subscribe to their newsletter and social media to stay in the loop for all the latest progress. Hyperloop VCU is starting a new semester, and they had a really interesting talk about their work. So you can join them and learn about them and apply to learn and be a part of the Hyperloop. So yeah, keep it up, VCU, and thanks for sharing that. And then Airloop, the team from Dublin, Ireland, and a couple other universities around Dublin, is kicking things off by doing a pitch talk at the Y Combinator and having a fireside chat, which is really interesting. So good on you, Airloop, and keep posting. So that's about all the news for today. Keep in the Hyperloop and let us know if you have any news stories or if you want to do a brief video hangout and a chat. Also, these live sessions are kind of impromptu, but let us know what you think, and feel free to share any news stories with us. So subscribe and like and stay in the Hyperloop.